General Hospital spoilers tease that the dangers that surround Sonny are no longer the cold blows of the underworld that he used to be familiar with, but silent, sophisticated and no less brutal attacks, carefully calculated to destroy him not only by force, but by fear, isolation, and the deepest wounds. In that context, a strange thing happens. The more dangerous, the closer to death, Sonny makes the relatives who were once distant, once separated by years and personal pride, gradually find each other. No one says it. But everyone knows, if Sonny falls this time, there will be nothing left to connect the broken life of his family. Carly, the woman who once loved Sonny deeply, is feeling the cracks in her heart begin to crack again as she witnesses him silently weakening and can do nothing but stand by and watch. Michael, the son who had once declared that he had severed ties with his father because of unnamed trauma, now sat brooding for hours in his hospital room, waiting for positive news that he knew would not come easily. Christina, hot-tempered and impulsive, tried to hide her pain in reckless actions just to feel like she was not useless in the midst of her panic. Dante, with the calm exterior of a police officer, was in turmoil inside. As part of him wanted to stay true to his professional principles, but the other part, the son part, just wanted to save his father who was slowly disappearing from reach. And then, just as everything was about to collapse, a series of even more terrible shocks suddenly occurred, as if fate wanted not only to push Sonny to the edge, but also to test what was left in the hearts of those who loved him. Relatives who were thought dead, suddenly appeared. Not a rumor, not a blur, but real, flesh and blood, standing before them. Eyes filled with lost years. A cousin who was thought to have perished in a mysterious explosion. A brother who had disappeared at sea without a trace. And maybe, even, Morgan. Their return was not only shocking, it shook every principle of logic that Port Charles had ever relied on to survive. No one could believe it was happening. No one understood why. Where had they been all this time? Why were they returning now? And why, by a strange coincidence, at the exact moment Sonny was facing death? These questions arose not only in the minds of Carly, Michael, and Dante, but also in the hearts of the audience watching every breath in Port Charles. What if this was a plan? What if this was the ultimate elaborate trap to push Sonny into a state of panic, to break him from the inside with the faces that loved him most? Or, on the contrary, is it the final miracle that fate has bestowed upon him, when those he thought were lost forever return as a milestone marking a new beginning? In Port Charles, where life, death, love, hatred are always mixed in every breath, the line between miracle and madness is as thin as smoke. These returns not only evoke emotion but also create waves of doubt, skepticism, and fear. For if they really survived, who helped them? Who kept them? And what was their purpose? Amidst the unverified words, the half-true memories, and the suspicious looks between relatives, one thing is becoming clear: this is not just a reunion, but a fierce test of trust, of family love, and of whether one can forgive what has been forgotten, hidden, or betrayed. Sonny, though he lies on the thin line between life and death, is still at the center of the chaos, the one who has created a bond that binds dozens of people in darkness and light. But this time, that bond is being stretched to its limits. And if it breaks, it will not only be the fall of a family, it could be the end of an era in Port Charles's history. Brenda and Spencer Cassadine, two names that once dominated Port Charles, will return not as mere figures from the past, but as two energetic and calculating tornadoes, carrying clear goals and untold secrets. Their simultaneous return marks a new era of turmoil. Not only for Sonny Corinthos but also for the entire power structure that trembles beneath the city's false facade of stability. Because Port Charles has never been a peaceful land. And the simultaneous presence of Brenda and Spencer is like two knives piercing the shell of what seemed to be sleeping. Brenda, the woman who always entered Sonny's life like a storm, both beautiful and destructive, now returns no longer as the romantic lover of the past. Time has made her harder, sharper, and more unpredictable than ever. She's been through a lot, left Port Charles with a broken heart and broken trust, but now Brenda's not back for memories, but for a more powerful reason, power. She's learned how to stand alone, how to fight on the global chessboard, and now she's bringing all that experience back to the city that buried her youth and love to reclaim her rightful place. Sonny is Brenda's focus, but this time, he's no longer an object of affection but a vital link in her plan to rise to the center of the underworld's influence. Meanwhile, Spencer returns with the Cassadine family's huge shadow behind him, a heavy shadow, filled with blood, hatred and glory. Although once thought dead, like all Port Charles legends, Spencer has never truly gone. He returns as a statement, not just to reclaim Trina Robinson, the woman he has never stopped loving, but to reclaim the inheritance, the honor, and the power that he believes should have been his all along. Valentine Cassidy may be the current ruler, but Spencer's presence has made that position more tenuous than ever. Spencer is no longer a disoriented rebel, he has learned to play the game of power wisely, and he knows exactly where to strike, what to destroy, and who to hold in order to change the course of history. When Brenda and Spencer arrive together, they instantly become two new, unexpected, and threatening axes of power. And this is already starting to create tremors that cannot be ignored for Sonny, who is thrust into the middle of a battle he cannot control. Sonny's old enemies, the forces that once watched him silently from afar, are now confused. They no longer know where to turn, as Brenda brings international connections that Sonny once lacked. And Spencer is rekindling the Cassadine bloodline that has always been a threat to anyone who wants to overthrow the order. Sonny now faces not only failing health and strained personal relationships, but also a choice: either accept these two risky allies into the realm built on his blood and sacrifice, or try to control them, something that, for Brenda and Spencer, may be unthinkable. And this choice will be the beginning of a new series of troubles, as any wrong move could lead to total collapse. Behind the scenes, tense encounters begin to take place. Carly confronts Brenda for the first time in years, a reunion that is not easy, because there has never been peace between them, only the calm before the storm. Trina is caught between two men, one warm and new, the other never quite letting go, and her heart begins to waver when she sees Spencer in the flesh. Valentine, who once thought he was firmly on the Cassadine throne, begins to gather his advisors, anxious for the emergence of the rightful heir. Ava, Nina, Dex, and even Dante are pulled into a new vortex where no one can remain neutral. The real madness begins not when Brenda and Spencer return, but when everyone begins to realize that they are not here to fit in, but to dominate. A new order is being rewritten. An inevitable storm is approaching. And at its center, Sonny, once invincible, is now just one of the pawns being tested on a chessboard too big, too complicated, and too unnamed to name. Sonny is being pushed to his limits, not only by the forces that quietly manipulate his system of power, but also by the new calculations that are being triggered by invisible hands in the shadows. The changes in the criminal network of Port Charles are no longer simply territorial disputes or hidden interests, they are powerful undercurrents, penetrating deep into every corner of the system that Sonny has spent his life building. And now, as each close link cracks, as trust becomes a luxury, Sonny knows more than ever. He has no time to wait. The early signs are small, but they accumulate into an obsession that cannot be ignored. A shipment intercepted for no reason. A warehouse burned down with no one to take responsibility, an anonymous call warning that one of his own might be a spy, none of it is random. Sonny felt a new control creeping into his system. A control that came not from violence but from ingenuity, ruthlessness, and organization. And something inside him began to stir, not fear, but the instinct of a cornered animal, ready to scream, fight, and crush anything that got in its way. For the first time in years, Sonny called a closed-door meeting without notice, without electronics. And no one was allowed in or out unless he confirmed it. Brick, Dex, Jason, the only three names Sonny trusted, were called first. Sitting in the darkness of an abandoned basement room that had once served as a security monitoring station, Sonny didn't say much, just tossed photos, recordings, and top-secret documents he'd collected over the past 3 weeks onto the table. His eyes were cold as steel as he looked at each person. There was no anger. Only calculation. Because Sonny knows. To survive in this era, emotions are the first thing that must be eliminated. Meanwhile, Michael feels a change in the way his father approaches everything. Every call is monitored. Every movement is tracked. Christina is asked to change her travel schedule, not to appear at familiar locations. Carly is disconnected from several financial accounts related to the chain of businesses that Sonny is running. And Dante, even though he is a law enforcement officer, cannot deny that his father is entering a gray area where there is no room for tolerance. Trina, Ava, Nina, those on the fringes of the center, also begin to feel the heat spreading. And then Sonny makes his move. He doesn't wait for the enemy to show up. He doesn't wait for anyone to confess. He organizes a raid on one of the secret warehouses on the edge of Port Charles, which is believed to be being used as a coordination center for the new force. The attack was silent, bloodless, and full of warning. 3 low-level bosses disappeared overnight. 2 investors backed out of deals. A charity was closed permanently after financial ties to those who were fighting Sonny. But that was just the beginning. Sonny knew this was not a war that would be resolved overnight. Behind the new executives were familiar faces, perhaps a former ally, a close friend he had saved. Or even a family member who was being manipulated without knowing it. And that was what made this war so crazy, not just because of its scale, but because it forced Sonny to question everything. No one was safe. No one could be trusted. Alone in his office as night fell, Sonny looked out the glass window at the city lights as if everything were still peaceful. But inside, the fire was burning. He knew, to protect the people he loved, to preserve the world he had built, he had no choice but to move forward. And this time, he was not fighting for fame, but for survival. Because if Sonny fell, everything would fall with him. Spencer and Brenda, 2 characters with powerful and troubled legacies from the past, will enter Port Charles with separate storylines, but each story is filled with dangerous calculations, simmering pressures, and secrets that could shake the fragile order of the city. Neither comes in search of reconciliation or peace. They come like 2 great waves from 2 different places, but both carry the same goal, to assert their position, take back what was stolen, and restore an order that they believe should be theirs. Spencer, with Cassadine blood flowing through his veins, returns no longer as a young man whose heart was broken by love. He is now a man tempered by time, by betrayal, and by the simmering anger of seeing his noble family manipulated by those who did not deserve it. He returns to Windmere not to reunite, but to reclaim. Valentine is weak, Nicholas is still a shadow that no one knows when he will return, and Victor is only an echo of evil. In the midst of this power vacuum, Spencer no longer wants to stand on the sidelines. He wants to hold on to Cassadine, but not in the old way, but by redefining the family's power in his own image, a cold, strategic leader, willing to do anything to avoid being pushed out again. However, Spencer's pressure does not only come from the outside. He has to deal with his own internal wounds, his unresolved love affair with Trina, his past obsession with Esme, and especially the unanswered question of whether he can truly escape the shadow of Victor and Nicholas to become another Cassadine, not evil, but not easily subdued. And this becomes a kind of obsession, a constant internal adjustment, as Spencer is forced to choose between emotional vulnerability and the ruthlessness needed to control a crumbling fortune. Meanwhile, Brenda returns with a different mission. No longer the heartbroken lover chasing Sonny's shadow, she is now a shrewd and intelligent warrior, carrying with her the hard-won lessons of her time outside Port Charles. Brenda has not returned for love, she has returned to recalibrate her interests, especially those that were discarded when she left in silence. Old relationships, secret deals, emotional legacies, and familiar faces are now pawns in her personal political chessboard. Brenda is pursuing a major investment project, perhaps a healthcare chain, a fashion house, or a shadow financial system, but what she really wants is not profit, but influence. She wants to build an empire of her own, out of Sonny's shadow, but still on par with all those who thought she was weak. And to do that, she's willing to take any risk. Including direct confrontation with Carly, Nina, or even Sonny himself if he gets in her way. But what makes things even more troubling is this: neither Spencer nor Brenda are playing it alone. Each brings allies, secrets, documents, and leverage that can upend the already fragile relationships in Port Charles. Spencer can exploit divisions within the Cassadine establishment to consolidate his power. Brenda can use international connections to bring in capital, financial weapons, and intelligence. And when these two start to act, nothing is random, every move is a strike, every word is a move, and every new alliance is a threat to those who don't adapt. Port Charles is standing on a thin sheet of glass, and beneath its feet is a gathering earthquake. As Spencer asserts himself as Cassadine's heir, and Brenda plots to reassert her personal power, the city will never be the same again. New impositions, from the restructuring of underground power networks, to the redistribution of interests in business, healthcare, and finance, will set off a chain reaction. Faces that seemed safe in the spheres of influence of Sonny, Valentine, and Carly now have to ask, who are their true allies? The story of Spencer and Brenda is not simply about two people returning. It is about two opposing forces, simultaneously landing on a city that is too tired of division, loss, and the never-ending storms of power. And this time, the new imposition does not come from the enemy, but from those who seem to belong to the past. But in Port Charles, the past always has a way of coming back, and taking everything back. Sonny is quietly preparing for an all-out counterattack, not the usual retaliation of a Port Charles kingpin, but a plan so insane, so sophisticated, so ruthless that even those closest to him can't predict it. This is no longer a defensive war. This is a proactive move. Carefully calculated down to every breath, every look, every handshake, as if Sonny knows that if he doesn't act first, he will be the one wiped off the board forever. It's all starting with the growing signs of trouble. Sonny is not just being watched, he's being strategically isolated. Shipping routes are being tightened, old allies are pulling out. Once reliable sources are becoming eerily silent. And worst of all, the local government is starting to show signs of turning against him, with hidden financial investigations. Inquiries into charities Sonny once funded. Everything pointed to it, something was trying to wipe him out of every corner of the city, not with violence, but with invisible, ruthless control. But Sonny was no longer a man who would wait for the tide to come. He began rebuilding his team. Without fanfare. Without fanfare. He relied not only on Brick and Dex, but also on some of his old shadowy figures, men who had disappeared from the map of Port Charles, but who still owed him their lives. A new system was established, decentralized, encrypted, mobile, and not dependent on any central command. All communications were encrypted on separate channels. Each team operated as a single link. If one team failed, the others could continue their mission unaffected. And then Sonny begins to implement one of the craziest ideas he has ever pursued. The creation of a reflexive wall of power, a network where any attack on him, whether financial, informational, or human, will be countered in an equal or greater way. Who dares to block the flow of his goods? The next night, the entire financial transaction data of his rival company will be released online. Who dares to attack his close staff? A surprise investigation will be launched, plunging the entire enterprise behind that person into crisis. Sonny is no longer playing by the old rules, he is playing by his own rules. And anyone who doesn't play by them will pay the price. The change has shaken Port Charles. Those who thought Sonny was weak are now forced to sit down and reassess their strategies. New allies are wary of him. Enemies are starting to panic, because Sonny is no longer playing defense. He hunts. He attacks. And he does it without leaving a trace, as if it were all accidents. Coincidences, or terrifying coincidences. But that also puts Sonny in extreme danger. Because the stronger he gets, the more dangerous he becomes. The more daring he acts. The more likely he is to push himself to the edge. And within that edge, even more insane adjustments begin to form. Sonny begins to doubt those closest to him, not because they've done anything wrong, but because he can't be sure who's loyal and who's been bought off. Jason, even though he's a longtime friend, can sense Sonny's eyes lingering too long, as if he's examining them. Carly, even though she's still there, starts to feel like she's being held back. Michael, Christina, Dante, they all see the change, but no one dares to confront it. Sonny now wears two masks. One is the calm, composed face that still smiles, shakes hands, and shows up at public events. The other is a screaming warrior inside, ready to tear apart anything that gets in his way. And the storm he's stirring isn't simply a fight for survival, it's a statement to all: Sonny never really disappeared. He's just waiting for the right moment to come back, stronger, scarier, and unstoppable. Nicholas will soon be released from prison, and the news is like a match thrown into an already tense powder keg in Port Charles. When rumors begin to spread that the man behind the betrayal, deception, and manipulation, the man who has hidden more than a few truths in the shadows of Windmere, is back in the game. The entire power structure of General Hospital is shaken. For Nicholas's return is more than just the release of a prisoner. It's the rebirth of a force, the return of a haunting from the past, and a warning that things once forgotten will no longer sleep. The first adjustments come not from Nicholas, but from those who know him best: Ava, Spencer, Laura, Valentine, and even the silent enemies he's so skillfully manipulated. They all know one thing: Nicholas never strikes unless he's sure of victory, and he never shows up unless he has a plan. His acceptance of being locked up, of being silent, of disappearing from the lives of Spencer, Trina, and the entire Cassadine clan, wasn't an admission of defeat, it was a move. And that move was now about to explode. Spencer, who was trying to regain his place in the family, was feeling the pressure. While Nicholas was in prison, Spencer could claim power, make strategic decisions, and gradually establish himself as the rightful heir. But if Nicholas returned, everything would change. Spencer knew that his father didn't need noise to control him. Nicholas only needed one word, one look, one well-timed move, to pull the spotlight away from Spencer, to push him back into the shadow he had been. And that was Spencer's biggest obsession. To prove that he was no longer the impulsive son living in his father's shadow, but a grown man who could confront and surpass Nicholas. Ava, meanwhile, is not calm either. No matter how many layers of lipstick or masks of calm she wears, Ava has never truly overcome the psychological damage Nicholas has left behind. Nicholas's lies, his drama, and his scheming moves have left her devastated, deceived, and bereft of love and power. Now that he is about to return, Ava is no longer afraid, but she knows this will not be a reunion. This is a war, and if she doesn't act first, she will be the one to lose. And it is at this point that new adjustments in the underworld begin to take shape. Valentine, who once believed he had control of what was left of the Cassadine family, orders a review of old transactions, summoning close advisors to determine what Nicholas plans to do behind bars. And Laura, whose mother has always held out hope that Nicholas can redeem himself, is thrown into crisis. She doesn't know who her son will come back as: the man who fought to defend Cassadine's honor, or the schemer who will betray all morals for absolute power. A new madness is brewing in Port Charles. Forces that have been in place are shifting. Secrets that seemed buried, Ava's blackmail, Esme's death, Nicholas's secret connections to European financial firms, are slowly being resurfaced. A series of old names are starting to surface in internal investigations. Reporters are hired to dig up the Nicholas file before he leaves prison. And the scariest thing of all, Nicholas isn't answering anyone. Not a word of acknowledgement. Not a meeting. Not a statement. Not a clear move. His silence is the biggest threat. Because everyone in Port Charles knows, when Nicholas goes silent, it's time to wipe the slate clean and rewrite it with a different hand, colder, more calculating, and ready to eliminate anyone who gets in his way. General Hospital enters a new phase with an unfathomable amount of pressure. Spencer is put in direct confrontation with his father. Ava must choose, fight or flee. Laura is torn between mother and protector. Valentine is quietly rallying his faction. And Sonny, who's still in a life-and-death struggle with new forces, may face a Nicholas-Brenda alliance if things go too far. Everyone is waiting for Nicholas to walk out of prison. Because that moment will be the beginning of a new power struggle, and this time, no one is safe.